All kind of technical difficulties going on this morning.
Hey,
Ladies and
this,
gentlemen, welcome to the Liberated Educator Podcast. Are you guys hearing that echo?
nope, it's in your ears. It's in your ears.
It definitely is in my ears, and that's not good.
You're like, my ears are the ones that matter.
All right, well, welcome to the Liberated Educator Podcast. We are live for the very first time, on for your viewing pleasure. I've got one half of the Liberated Educator Podcast group, Lanier, here with us. Ken
That's
will be
what's
joining
up.
us later on, but you all know the familiar face here. Jay, what's going on, Jay?
What's going on? Good morning.
Jay, how you
Half
pronounce your last
squad.
name?
What's
Jay,
that?
how you pronounce your last name?
Oh, Sorensen. Mr. Sorensen 805.
All right, D, take over
805?
for a second. I got to get rid of that echo.
It's all good. All good. All right. So if folks are just tuning in, they're like, what's happening right now? This is the green room. This is the back room. This is literally how we normally construct things for the Liberated Educator. So it's incredibly cool to have this happening right now and having, this program director and extraordinaire. I'm just going to call you Mr. 805, not Jay. So, the Liberated Educator, normally me and Ken will be on in a little bit. We're going to do the show. We're actually going to do a live recording. Mike, good to see you, sir.
Hey, D, how you doing? Brian?
Good.
Hey, Mike, what's going on? I got rid of the echo, so I'm good now.
We're good. So I can't call Jay Mr. 805 because Mike is also 805. So dang it. So anyway, what we're going to do is actually kind of do what we normally do, which is construct what our three themes are, but we're going to require some audience participation, kind of hear what's most top of mind for folks. And then later in about 3 hours, we're actually going to do a live recording for Rocksnard and do the whole thing, the whole shebang based on the feedback from y'all, from student panel, and what have you. So that's the dealio.
So for those that were looking on the sked, we're flipping it.
That's what we do sometimes.
Yeah.
It's going to be real.
It's called being flexible in the moment.
Teachers know about that. Teachers know all about that.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are watching actually on YouTube, some were saying that they are not seeing it. Are you guys able to see it on YouTube?
One and all is
All right, we got a yes. I just got to see.
Yes.
Got a
Has
yes.
it started?
Right.
Who's it?
That's a good question.
Our very guests asked that question. They're like, are we actually recording right now?
All right, I see a couple of yeses.
Yes. All right, that's what's up.
All right, so D was actually explaining kind of how the show is built. First of all, I'm Brian Smith. I wasn't introduced, but I'm the fly on the wall, on the podcast. I get a chance to really listen into these wonderful, deep, but very normal conversations from D and Ken. So it's like them picking up the phone, and I just get a chance to record what's going on. And as D was saying, it's built around 3 letters, CPT, and that has to. Well, we're going to crowdsource this, right? Didn't you already say
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was gonna mess with it. We got to tell the backstory. I definitely have to tell the backstory behind all that.
Okay. I'll let you handle all of that.
All
But
right.
I just want the audience to be prepared, for some participation. So we see your chats going on inside of YouTube. If you want to say something, that's pertinent to the conversation, by all means, feel free to do so. We'll go ahead and show it up on the screen as well and make it a part of the conversation. But I'll be quiet like I normally do, and I'll sit on the board here and produce. But I'll let D take it away. Go ahead, D. Give us some background.
All right. So background, how this pod was birthed. So first of all, Ken and I, folks who don't know, like, we're brothers for real. That is my homie for life. And, we used to work for the same company, and even prior to that, whenever we were in the same vicinity, we just gravitated towards one another. We would chop it up over different subjects, different topics. And then it just became a thing where whenever we were in the same event, whether it was something that we were doing for our same company or we were just at a conference together, we were just talking deep, literally going deep on issues, particularly around race and education. Like that's just thematically where we always go. That's our normal conversation. And every now and then someone would pull up a chair and be like, hey, can I sit with y'all? Can we talk? And they join in on our conversation. And they're like, man, that was deep. That was a deep conversation. It's like, yeah, well, welcome to our normal convo. And sometimes it would be like predicated on like something that happened socially, right? Something that's bugging us, something that happened experientially. And so we would just start chopping it up about that. And eventually it just came up as a concept, like we should do a pod together. Like we need to, actually, I don't even think we said we need to make a pod together. I think what we said was we should have been recording that. That's what it just get. Like we should have been recording that. Like our conversations would go so deep and we'd play off of one another. We challenge one another, force one another to critically think about issues. And it's like, we should have been recording that. So then that's when the whole podcast concept came up. And it was literally about a year and a half worth of just going back and forth. I think we recorded one episode, shared it out to a couple people just to hear what they thought, and people's reaction were, y'all need to be recording together. You need to be recording together. And so that's when the idea was originally birthed. We need to be recording just like our regular phone calls or regular conversations in person. And I'll pause it there, see if Mike or Jay have any other questions or people in the chat, because I'd love to tell more of the story, but I want to give a breather.
No.
Some people are trying to figure out how to get in and all that stuff.
I look forward to having that conversation and working through that based on our experience in the conference here we've had at Roxnard. Chime in with their big takeaways. We did a couple thought exchanges where we got some ideas from people from what they experienced and what they heard from our student panel. Student panel was powerful.
Student panel was incredible. That was awesome.
You shared some of the graphics from that. Wow. And Brian, just like what normally happens when we're recording and having discussion, I see Brian's reactions and I'm like, wait, what's he reacting to? What you thinking, man? What you thinking?
I want to know more because I saw the responses, I saw the graphics. Very, very excited about the thought exchange process you guys went through with that student panel. Would love to hear more about that because the conversation will also be crafted around the responses, in that session as well. So,
well, the student panel, Jay has done for a while, Twitter chats and done meetings with students just to kind of check in and see where the kids are coming from. In our conversation about this year's Roxnard conference, it was like, okay, we get all these great experts to come in and share what they know and share their ideas, and we get a lot of rich conversation every year because the folks that come to the conference, the people that present at the conference, they're awesome. But the idea that how about we check with the client and so that was Jay's idea. It was genius. And the students that we got are from an organization called Justice in the Classroom. And we had high school students from schools pretty much all over the county. They weren't all from the same district. And we had a couple students who have graduated from schools in the county. One just finished her undergraduate degree at Harvard, and another is just starting his college career at Berkeley. So to get their perspectives on a number of issues, we asked them about grading, we asked them about inclusivity, being marginalized. We asked them about SEL and mental health, and their insights were phenomenal. It was really, really fun to talk with them and hear their thoughts.
That's powerful. That's absolutely powerful. Yeah, so we definitely want to incorporate some of those things that came from the student panel. Maybe it's helpful for me to explain the C and the P and the T, because those are our three concepts, and people are launching all kinds of questions in the YouTube chat.
Yep.
So
And we'll go ahead and post them there. So why don't you go ahead and give the foundation?
Yeah,
we'll get to some of those questions.
Got you. So once upon a time, not long ago, there used to be an app that I used regularly, Marco Polo. Some of y'all may still use Marco Polo. And so Ken and I would just like video chat or just like send little recorded messages to one another back and forth, because we're in two different time zones. Like, we're both Cali boys from birth, but I live on the East Coast. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So he's on the West Coast. So with the time zone, like every now and then, like he would just throw me stuff at random times and I would do the same, and we'd pick up on it and we would just have this little asynchronous dialogue. Sorry, trigger warning. I used the word asynchronous to a bunch of educators who are tired of that word. My bad. But one day I hit him up I said, hey, this may sound crazy, but I had this wild idea. And like, what if we were to call our podcast CPT? But here's the thing. We never tell anyone what CPT stands for. We never reference it. We just call it CPT, and we make every single segment about something that starts with a C, a P, or a T. I was like, just hear me out. And I'm like hearing his arguments in my head, because of course it's just me recording it. And he hit back and he was like, I love it. Let's work with it. And then we can explain more about the concept of CP and the T. And I was like, no, we never explain it. That's the whole deal. We just let people go, we know what CPT stands for, but we're always flipping it. We're always turning it on its head, because, the reality is that he and I, we're always talking on these important issues. We're always discussing social issues. We're always discussing race and racism in schools. That's like our normal everyday conversation. And so the whole idea or concept of Black people always late, people of color always late. It's like, no, we're not late talking about these things. You just may be late hearing about it. And even us doing some recordings and just keeping them in the archives. So I think, like I said, we recorded one episode kind of privately and launched that out silently. But then we also like recorded a couple phone calls and just said, let's just keep this as a concept. So that's how the CPT first got started.
I see Jay laughing. Are you laughing at the dog or the response?
No, I'm laughing at the dog.
Well, and I think Jay's laughing because it's usually my dogs that cause that problem. So.
It's my dog. It's my dog.
Your dog is mine.
It's mine. It's mine.
And here's the funny thing is, from my vantage point, I know Dee and Ken, we go back a little bit, they're more like mentors to me. And they express the concept, and I just begin to salivate, and I was like, okay, just let me produce it. I just want to be able to, one, be in the room where it happened. Okay. All right. Get that out of the way. But also because I understand the importance of some of these office conversations that we have. Some of these conversations are the most powerful conversations ever, and no one hears them. They just stay within the four walls of, of your office space or in your classroom. And I realize how vital it would be to hear these meaningful conversations, sometimes deep, sometimes very difficult to listen to, but they're relevant. And that was necessary. So, I begged and pleaded to allow me to produce it.
Okay. Wait. I got to jump in, because this was the craziest thing. This was the absolute craziest thing. Because Ken and I, we had a couple of different reasons why we were just slow to start with doing the pod, right? clearly with time differences that always create a logistical challenge. He's always keynoting somewhere. I'm sometimes keynoting somewhere. And then it's like, how can we make this happen? And Ken is old school. Like, he's not on here right now, so I can talk about him. Like, he's one of the few people that I know. Like, he will just randomly call you. No text message in advance, just call. And then if you don't answer, he'll actually leave you a voicemail. So I feel like I got a throwback friend and my brother Ken, and so a lot of our conversations, they were never scheduled. They were never like, hey, I'm gonna hit you up at 7 tonight, can you chat? Like, nothing like that. Just randomly, if he calls and I can answer, I'm on it. And then I started to pick up on the same thing. I'm like, man, I wonder if Ken's available right now. Something's like irking us. And so that's the way that our conversations were always going. And then we'd always be like, man, we got to start recording. We got to put this on a pod. And we started dumping everything in a spreadsheet. We had a C, a P, and a T. And we just started throwing themes in there, little notes, hyperlinks to an article or what have you. And so we were like building out this concept. But what we didn't have was time, energy, effort, commitment, whatever, to actually put it all together. And Brian's a mutual friend of both of ours. I'm just talking to Brian, just regular convo, having nothing to do with this pod. Now, I had the privilege of being a guest on a couple of different pods that Brian produces, but we're just chopping it up, just talking. And I said, yeah, Ken and I, we keep trying to get this podcast put together. And before I even got together out of my mouth, he says, let me be your producer. Let me produce it for you. What? You talk about something being just great for the soul is when a brother says, I would love to do that for you. And I was like, look, that's not even a fight. That's a straight up yes and thank you. And I have no idea how we could ever compensate you. He's like, brother, like, can I do this for you? I hit up Ken, and Ken's like going crazy with every emoji. And then we hopped on the call and started making it happen. And this podcast would not exist, not just from inception, but all the time. Like, he keeps us wrangled, he keeps us together, he helps with the guest list, all those things. So sorry to interrupt, brother. It's not like you get a mic enough, but I had to interject because I know you would downplay it, make it seem like, yeah, and then this happened. Like, nah, man. Like, you blessed us by those words. Can I produce it?
All right, let's not get too emotional in here, man.
Well, we do too.
All right, let's get to some of those questions, though. We have a question from Jennifer here. It says, D, this is my first experience with the Liberated Podcast. What's the podcast's ultimate goal?
Okay, so for all my educating and Jennifer, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at some of the stuff that was in my head, because I know, like, I've been asked at different times, like, can you help with our class that's starting up a podcast? And there's always like this really streamlined approach to the podcast. And I think those things are great. But I'll just say, we didn't like put it at the top and say, and our goal for our listeners is, what we said was, people keep saying that our conversations are meaningful and that other people need to hear it. Okay, we'll put it on wax and we'll see what happens. So that may not be necessarily the answer you're looking for, but it's the most straight up and real answer there is. Other people have found our conversations meaningful, so we said, let's make it available. And then it evolved. I think when we got our first guest, I can't even remember who our very first guest, but I remember when we got Victoria on and we vibed with her so strong, it was like, we got to do this again. And we started just bringing more people in. And so it's become, we're having conversation in the most normal way we know how. And we're inviting other people to listen in and to join in.
Victoria is the next session here at Roxnard, by the way.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Shout out.
So Victoria is actually a regular, on the podcast. Try to get her on. I think we talked about quarterly, but it's like bi-monthly now. One of her episodes is actually coming up next week. So be sure to check that out. I did bring the link in for the podcast for you to listen to it, and I'll bring it up here also later on in the show. Well, speaking of the conference and Victoria coming up next, there are some wonderful comments about the conference in itself. As you're seeing in the chat, Jay and Mike, kind of wanted you to speak to some of those particular comments as well. For example, Heidi says this conference has been enlightening. I love that word. I've been in this business for a while now, and I have discovered depth and all the I don't know what I don't knows from our presenters. Enlightened. Why don't you speak to that a little bit about what's taking place in the conference so far?
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, Heidi. As we were planning this one, last year was interesting timing, August of 2020, what we thought was going back to school, sometime soon. This year, coming off the year and a half of the pandemic and distance learning, and again, hopefully coming back to school in person, we wanted to sort of frame the conference with, okay, we've all experienced this thing for the last year and a half. Let's take those lessons learned, those new tools we added. Let's take all that and not revert back to the way things were, but let's make some real change. Now's a great moment to take advantage of that. So we wanted to sort of frame the conference around that, around some topics, looking at grading and assessment. That's a place that we can make some change. We wanted to focus on a shift towards inquiry-based learning and project-based learning. We wanted to look at equity. That was kind of around everything, but that was also a strand within the conference. We wanted to look at SEL and wellness. That's been a big focus, and that came up a lot in the student panel.
Yeah.
And then a shift towards student-centered learning. So we wanted to focus on those things, and we brought in a bunch of experts from all around that were able to share. And so it's awesome to hear from people like Heidi saying that, this was eye-opening. That was one of the goals. And it's great getting, a bunch of new ideas from new people to help us all grow.
Yeah. Let me jump on that, because you mentioned about going back to way things were, and in the last episode before we took a little vacation to take care of ourselves, and our families, we had Jim O'Hagan on, and he spoke to that very richly. And I'll put the link in the chat for everyone to be able to grab that episode. But Dee, speak on that particular conversation, if you can remember so far. I mean, about how you guys discussed or went over that particular issue.
When we talking about play, we talk about practice. We talk about practice. Well, first of all, okay, so two parts to that.
Wait, hold on.
You got it. You ready? You ready for it?
Hold on. That's one of my favorite sound bites.
Listen, we talking about practice, not a game. We talking about practice.
Practice.
Okay, so this is why I love what we're doing right here, right now, because we're just letting people behind the curtain. So first of all, how the whole conversation with Jim went is how most of our pod episodes go, right? Like, we had the guest in, we have some ideas of what we're going to talk about from the segments. All of us read a lot, so we're nerdy like that. Read a lot, listen to a lot of podcasts, of course. Stay tuned in to what's happening out there. And Jim, we have him scheduled for a particular time. And then next thing you know, we get into a debate. If you recall this, we get into a debate of whether or not Kwame Brown was a bust.
Wait, this is during the podcast?
Yes. This is the way this always happens. Because again, we just have regular conversations, and we decided to start recording it. So once we start putting structures to it, it became a little bit more complicated. It's like, look, we actually haven't really begun yet until we introduce the first segment. And then Brian will literally throw a big timer on the screen so that we could see, like, you only got 10 minutes left in the segment. He'll be hitting up the chat like, you guys need to transition, move it all. We make it happen, and we keep moving. But we literally had Jim on the first time. I think we went at it for like 35, 45 minutes, just debating the concept of bust and How is somebody called a bust if they made it on the professional level? And we just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then we're like, yeah, we're going to have to reschedule and have another recording. It's all right, cool. So we did that. When we finally, yeah, it was fun. Well, but it's also very typical. Sometimes we have our segments planned. We say we know exactly what we're going to talk about. We may even do some pre-research, but then the conversation goes somewhere else. And then we're firing up the chat of how can we transform this title to something creatively that matches a C or P or T, depending on where we're supposed to be in it. And so we just make those things happen. But part of the reason why we brought in Jim was to talk about how people are really big on pontificating around creativity and innovation and, you know, big words that don't really have substance behind them unless you give examples, right? So a big one was just like the power of play and the neurological, you know, science that backs, you know, how learning and how imagination is actually enhanced through play and concepts of deep play and how we should be integrating play as a critical part of our curriculum. And so, of course, you got somebody who camps out in that area all the time. You have two other dudes who are very much in line with it. You know, I've created a product that is playful of sorts. And so we can get into the whole concept and discuss. And I'm like, it's like double Dutch. All right. Whenever I'm on with Ken, right, it's both of us are talkers. If you haven't met us and you don't know this, we're both talkers.
Understatements.
But then there's also there's levels to this. Ken is more of a talker than I am. Believe that or not.
Do we need to fact check that with Ken?
I love that. That was great.
We got Brian here. We got Brian. So, and just being real, because like he's my older brother, so I defer to him. But then, you know, we'll kind of go. But then you add a guest on, we both defer to whomever the guest is, and we really want to hear their perspective. So, I definitely say hit up that pod to hear more from the speaker himself. But we've had some dope guests come in, and they're mostly just friends, just to be real.
Yeah.
We just call up our friends and be like, hey, can we get you on the pod? Because we think that you have a perspective that needs to be heard. And we actually just want to have dialogue with you. And most of our guests, matter of fact, all of our guests say, that was so dope. Can I come back? And we're like, absolutely. Because all you asked was, can we have another conversation, and happen to record it?
Yeah, I'm just showing some of the guests that we've had, you know, so far. And this is just season one, you know, what it is that we've done. You see Victoria on there, you know, as well.
Victorious.
Yeah, we're coming up with a theme song for her for the next episode, you know. But that's just a glimpse of some of the guests that were there. The link is in the YouTube chat, so you can actually click on that to go. I love that comment, you know, from is it Sean? Do you pronounce it Sean? Sean? Okay. I know the importance of names and pronouncing them correctly, so I want to make sure that I pronounce that correctly. If I say your name and I don't, please put it the phonetic spelling of it in the chat, and I will definitely get that corrected for you. My name is Brian Smith. It's kind of hard to mess up, but believe it or not, my dad spells it brain, and I get superintendents constantly spelling it brain when they email me. You know, it's quite hilarious, and I just, you know, tell them I appreciate you thinking that I'm extremely smart, but my name is actually Brian. But anyway, moving on. Moving on. That concept, though, here of allowing kids to see these type of discussions. You know, you had your student panel, you know, which, you know, sounds like it was extremely powerful. And I would love to go back and look at that recording as well. What is your take on, you know, opening up the door for kids to be able to experience these type of conversations that you have as adults? And this is for anybody. Mike, you can jump in. Jay, you can jump in. And
well, I was struck by some of the comments that I was seeing from teachers that were observing the panel, and so many of them hearing the kids talk about the need for connections and the appreciation they had for the teachers that would actually take the time to check in with them while they were doing distance learning. And the statements from teachers saying, this is a takeaway. I'm going to make sure that I redouble my efforts to check in with my students, to make those connections, just to see how they're doing, which is an extension of just, sort of the traditional thing is the focus is always on the academics and the relationship kind of stops right there. But creating those deeper and more meaningful relationships with students is so critical to that engagement, and that relationship is what fosters learning. So for me, it was really gratifying to see teachers kind of grab that as a takeaway. Like, yeah, because of COVID, we had to do these sorts of things just to make sure that our students were okay. But we should have been doing this all along. And now that commitment to carry that forward, for me, that's I really appreciate that from the folks that said it.
You mentioning the checking in on your students makes me think too that throughout the pandemic, I heard that a lot from teachers, that their admin did or did not check in on them, and how what that meant.
Did or did not. Yeah. And SEL, self-care for teachers, has been a conversation we've been having for a while now. And, times like this, and everybody's got to pivot at the last minute for so many changes and what's going on. There's no predictability. And when there's no predictability, our stress levels go up because we just have to be ready for that next thing that we don't know what it's going to be. And that sort of self-care and that checking in and that community aspect of just making sure that we're all okay. I think Jay's point is important. That extends farther into the educational system than just the teacher and their relationship with their students.
I got to shout out Doreen Bondi's session too. She had a SEL teacher mental health session about taking a break. She had everyone just turn off their cameras, and she led you through some stretches, breathing exercise things, but made you feel good about it and that you need this and you deserve this. And people tweeted out after that they were in tears and they felt so good, and it was beautiful. I think that's something we need regularly.
Yeah. I saw lots of shout outs to Nyree Clark and her self-care session as well. Mm-hmm. Mental and emotional health. I got to definitely say that's part of the reason why we had Victoria Thomas come through. My fault. Come through multiple times because, like she feels like the team therapist. Like she's the therapist for all of us, and she just reminds us of the need for self-care. I remember the episode with Val Brown was super special like that as well. But Ken and I, we say it regularly, like this podcast is therapy for us. It's our opportunity to talk through things. But like, yo, am I crazy? Because this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm experiencing right now. Am I crazy? Because everybody else around me kind of looks at me sideways and makes me feel like I'm nuts right now. But that point that you brought up, Mike, of having the opportunity to not only care for students, but for educators to be cared for. And Jay, for you bring up teachers highlighting whether or not their admin checked in on them. I share this story regularly because it was so meaningful. But when I remember after some body cam footage was released after the death of Keith Lamont Scott here in Charlotte, North Carolina, there was all this effort around making sure that we had the right talking points for the students. And no one ever asked me if I was okay. And I broke in the middle of class. And, I didn't try to. I didn't want to. I definitely didn't want to. But I remember I was standing in the back of a group of third graders. And there was a teacher who was in the front because I was more technology support for this class. And he's talking to the kids and fielding questions and going back and forth. And all of a sudden he looked up and he could see my face. He saw my eyes and he went, "I'm sorry. Hey, D, are you okay?" And I turned around. Get me right now. And I just turned around and I just started bawling Like, no one stopped to ask me, how are you doing right now? You know, we're trying to help children understand what's happening, but it's really the adults in the building that are feeling it, because this is compounded trauma, right? So a lot of our conversation, Ken and I, we're working it out. We are exercising the demons of the things that are constantly depressing us. So that's our pod, but having the same space for the students as well as having the same space with the students is critical as well. So I'm looking forward to the recording later, because I think we already decided, after looking at the data, we have to highlight this main area of communication, in kind of, in other words, interaction directly with the kids. Love to, discuss about like what some of the things that Dr. Geneva Gay says about that, some of the things that Dr. Arnita Brown says about that, Arnita Ball, says about that. So we need to bring those things into the convo.
Yeah, I was going to say, now that we've heard a little bit about the history of the podcast and CPT, and a little bit about the conference, if we could get some audience ideas, perspectives on their ideas for the CPT. You just mentioned conversations, communication. I think that was a big one. We thought on the thought exchange that we had, there was, mental health conversations, communications with their students and their students' families is a big one. We were talking about the importance of communicating admin to teacher, teacher to student. But I'd love to hear folks in the audience have other ideas for their CPT.
Yeah, well, what we're going to be talking about later, in about 2.5 hours, we're going to live record. We need to have our segments together.
Yeah, so if you're in the audience, go ahead. We're going to crowdsource this podcast episode, which will be recorded and produced and published. So we want you to definitely be feel a part of it. So in the chat, go ahead and throw out your C, your P, and your T, or your T. We've got one, peer-to-peer learning. Okay,
that's big.
That's one. And we've got an idea in the private chat as well.
I was thinking that for this one, for what we're doing right now. So for those of you who don't see it, don't know, so it's in the conversation that we oftentimes, like, we're doing it twice right now, right? So we think of what are those concepts. Like I said earlier, sometimes they come together in the conversation. So it's like, man, the direction of this conversation already, it's like, if I would call this pre-show episode, it would be critical podcast therapy. Just to understand what this podcast is about. It's about that critical conversation on one side. It's also therapy on the other side. The podcast sits in the middle.
Dude, that's actually a full episode on its own. I've got ideas.
Let's go.
We need to bring back Val and Victoria at the same time.
We bring them. We need to make that a 90-minute and just.
That's the part 1, 2, and 3. It's the part 1, 2, and 3.
Let them flow.
Catherine. Oh, sorry. I jumped ahead. Let's see. Heidi put in courageous, poignant talking points. She put all of them together, CP and T.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Poignant. That's one of those hard words to say.
Did I say it wrong?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
I just get nervous. I see it on paper. You know those words that make you nervous? You're
yes.
I gotta say this word. Okay.
It's always in the paragraph that I had to read out loud too, right?
Yeah.
And then the nervousness makes it's like it's guaranteed. It's not gonna come out right.
I just scanned the page to find the paragraph that I was comfortable with, then I'd volunteer that.
That's what you do.
I was keynoting yesterday, and neurobiological was on my, it's on my screen. I wrote it. As soon as I saw the word, I was like, I don't know if I'm ready yet. I don't know if I'm ready to say it. Let's give this one a try. All right. Poignant.
Someone shouted out Alicia Sewell's SEL session earlier, but she had one of those moments too where she just got stuck on the word, but she has that Alabama accent, so kind of enjoyed it, but I felt bad for her.
That's another conversation. Let's see. I think teachers was the T that was being put in here. So how do we make true change that will impact our students when the student culture differs from the teacher's cultural background? That's
That's a whole conversation piece. That's ideological becoming. I'm down to talk about that for sure. That's Freddie meets Geneva Gay meets Arnitha Ball. Let's have that convo for sure. That's back team. Yeah.
okay. Love that. We got any more? We got teamwork as an option here as well. Go ahead.
I gotta say it too, because I just did it and I realized, wait, some people may want some explanation. This is something else we do in our pod. Like, we have our own conversation and we say, hey, if we name drop something or we reference an article, like every now and then we put certain references in the show notes. Brian does, I ain't gonna lie. Brian does all of our but sometimes we're like, this is an invitation to our regular conversation. If you're like, wait, I don't know what is that? Okay, look it up. Like, do the work. I guarantee you will be rewarded for the work. And so if I say Geneva Gay, if I say Arnitha Brown, if I say Bactine, if I say Pato Frede, if I say those names, you're like, I'm not 100%. I guarantee you, if you do a voice search in your Siri or your Google Assistant or your whatever, and you learn some on your own, you will be rewarded for it. You will enjoy it. You will feel the benefits of it much more than us just telling you. Tangent. My bad. See what happens when Ken ain't here? I go full flex mode and just talk.
It's okay. Here's another one. Culture focus pedagogy for teaching and learning.
I love. All right, is it Nicola? See, I want to make sure.
Rosalind, yeah.
Rosalind. Got you. No, I love that. Part of the thing too, when we're talking with our guests and we're talking through concepts, sometimes we say let's not make it something that's super generic. Let's make it something that is unique to that particular conversation. So I love how you built that out a little bit with culture focus, pedagogy for teaching and learning, right? Because sometimes people will be like, oh, and we can make the last T teaching. It's like, you know how much we'll be on repeat on that? It was like doing episodes last year. It's like, if we made police and Trump a P and a T, like, how do you distinguish between what episode? Because that was every other week. There was something to talk about. So I love the throwing it out a little bit.
Okay, I think we've got some good responses that we can mull over. We promise you, once we start the podcast, what time is it again? 3 p.m. Pacific?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll make sure that Kent's got that on his calendar. That's 5 for me and that's 6 for you, D. We'll do that. We'll come back. We'll have that deliberation prior to it, and then we'll get started with the podcast. So what you'll actually get a chance to see is a full recording of how we actually do the podcast with the actual conversations that take place. We'll also have this portion here to where you can actually comment and ask questions during the conversation. That would be a great addition, to how we actually record the podcast. So please join us and please participate as well. We're going to go ahead and cut this one here, but before we do that, we're going to give away, a Liberated Educator t-shirt, and this here in Texas is what we call tax-free weekend. So where everyone is actually out shopping for school supplies, and because there's no tax, so clothing, school supplies, electronics, whatever the case is that have to do with school. And I just so happen to have access to a couple of gift cards. We'll give one of those away because Amazon is participating as well in this. So we have 2 chances to win, and this is how it's actually going to work, ladies and gentlemen. So in the chat, here's what we want you to do. In the chat, let me go ahead and share the appropriate screen here. We want you to put in this hashtag in the chat to be entered into win. We'll do 2 drawings. We'll do one for the t-shirt and do one for the gift card. I won't announce what the gift card amount of the gift card until we tell who the winner is. I like the kind of mystery, going in. So if you just type in Rocksnard, #Rocksnard in the chat, that'll put you into the drawing. So ready, go. I don't see them in there.
I don't know if they all heard you too, because there's a dope conversation happening in the chat.
Oh yeah,
Now here it comes.
Okay, there we go. We got some entries in here. Good. We'll give it another couple seconds. Jesus, go ahead and put that back in there without the exclamation points before the hashtag. If you want to be entered in to win. All right, we'll do this in another 15. Thank you, Jesus. 14, 13, 12. I almost miscounted there. 9, 8, 7, 6.
Is that sort of like poignant?
There you go. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, perfect. All right, so this is how we'll do it. So the first winner will be for the t-shirt. We'll get your information, we'll get you the appropriate size, and we'll get that out to you. So let's see who our first winner is.
The suspense.
The tool as well. Like whatever Brian's always got some tech stuff happening too.
All right.
Yeah.
Kim Kavanaugh. Well, dang. Did I pronounce that right?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. See, I'm pretty good today. All right. So Kim, you are the winner of the t-shirt. Excellent. So now our winner for the gift card. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? And I've got 2 of these. We'll give one away now, and then we'll give one away later on. This is a $50 gift card that goes to Sandra. $50 Amazon gift card that goes to Sandra.
You should put my name up in this thing. Right
No, you disqualified. All right. All right. So you, the 2 winners, make sure that Jay, you got that.
Yep.
Sean is asking me what app do I use that. It's actually part of the broadcast streaming service that we actually use. It's kind of like the random name generator, but it's actually built into the streaming platform. All right, so cool. We'll get that information from you, and we'll get those t-shirt and that gift card out there. The gift card is actually digital. So Sandra, we just really need the email that you use, and we'll get the gift card out to you immediately. All right, so join us this afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, just to be fair and, make sure we're inclusive. That's also 4 p.m. Mountain, All right, we'll be back with the actual recording of the Liberated Educator Podcast, so you get to see the whole shebang.
Can I give a final thought? See Brian was in his radio voice. I knew.
Yes, I am.
He was about to close it out. But somebody, I saw the question was asked a couple of times, and so just to let it be known, yes, we are definitely big on having a diverse audience. Clearly, you have 2 Black men, so we're bringing our perspective, but that's part of the reason why we bring in our guests, right? So we bring in guests to get the diverse perspectives. And so if you hadn't seen the one with Dr. Sosin Jaber, you want to listen to that episode because fire. So just wanted to let that be known. Diverse audience is definitely welcome, but we are going to bring a perspective in most cases that is representing the cultural backgrounds in which we represent. So know that. Radio announcer voice, cue it back.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the I don't even know what to call this episode of the Liberated Educator Podcast. We'll see you this afternoon, this evening, and we can't wait for you to hear your thoughts as you participate in the conversation. And we are done. See ya.
Peace.